Let us go back to the book of Genesis, where God commanded that let the dry land be separated from the water. It says in chapter 1,
This was President Yoweri Museveni on 31st December 2024. It was his last address of the year. The head of state was concerned that wetlands were still being degraded.
why do you build in a wetland? Why do you build in a wetland? Don't you know that one day that house will be swept away?
This is the remote wetland that the president has always talked about. The last time we visited it was in 2018. Progress had been registered. District officials from both Kibuku and Parisa were optimistic.
Instead of them going for rice cultivation, which had become now seasonal, they now grow crops throughout the year.
However, a few years later, rice growers returned to the wetland.
We should amend the law, which is very clear that the wetland, this is what they call a wetland. Not every pot where the water gets stuck is a wetland.
It has since remained wetland this, wetland that on rice growing.
Ambrose down there in Ngenge.
But what would the fate of rice growers be today had the country embraced Professor Gilbert Bukenya's Upland rice growing project? The year was 2003. Professor Gilbert Bukenya, then Vice President of Uganda, had traveled to Thailand, where he noticed 100% of the country depended on rice. Curious, he wanted to see how rice was grown. And that is how he was driven to a place he describes as the heatland.
We went into the fields and I was amazed that the science was in Uganda, but the science had not left where it is being produced to the communities. I was a bit upset actually, but they made me to get in contact with Sasakawa.
Sasakawa was a private organization promoting a variety of local seeds. He was then introduced to Nerika 3, a rice variety developed by both Africa and Japan to grow in the uplands. Here in Africa, it had been developed in Uganda and Nigeria. Amazed, he asked for some seeds, which he planted on 1 acre of his farm and harvested 2.5 tons.
Almost 95% of the rice was being imported from Pakistan, from Gujarat in India, and a bit of it from Malaysia. And someone told me, in Pakistan at the bay, they have silos of rice, and the silos are written on for Uganda, then this rice goes, and most of the silos were written on African names.
After this successful experiment, it was extended to other parts of the country. Greater Luero, including Nakasongola, were destined to benefit, as well as the northern and western parts of the country. Acholi and Karamoja, Kisoro and Bundibujo were earmarked. The success of the upland rice in these areas, however, Bukenya says were politicized.
I was amazed by particularly politicians who mixed up politics with a very essential food security item, discouraging it to be grown. Let me tell you, one minister, whose name I will not say, went around shouting, Bukenya is finishing our swamps, Bukenya is finishing our forests. because he is growing rice in the water. I never promoted any rice grown in water. Never.
But how far would this have gone had the country fully embraced it? We spoke to some environment and climate change advocates.
If that had been taken seriously, I don't think by now we would be going through this. Because when you look at some of these floods, it is coming as a result of encroachment on wetland. And the most activities that is being done along the wetland are rice farming.
Not everyone is totally in agreement.
Upland rice can be additional. It can be an option because it will reduce demand for lowland rice. So we should promote upland rice, but it may not be a replacement entirely for lowland rice, because globally, I am not aware of any country where upland rice is higher in productivity than lowland rice.
There are still people, including me. Last year I planted, I got about 70 bags. Actually, I have not yet sold them. But I'm even thinking, how much have I invested? How much am I going to get from it? Now, we have the competing inflow rice, like from our neighboring countries. With the East African spirit, how do we prevent theirs coming in?
But what makes these upland rice varieties different from their lowland counterparts, aside from being a complement to wetland restoration efforts? Here are Professor Bukenya's other reasons.
The Asian tigers, and they're called Asian tigers, all of them depend on rice. In their place they can grow banana. In their place they can grow cassava. In their places they can also grow corn. But they depend entirely on rice. They eat it for breakfast. They eat it for lunch. They drink it as alcohol in the evening. And they eat it for supper. And they are brainy. In fact, the Europeans fear them. They are brainy, actively producing many things which here in Africa should have produced.
Rice continues to be one of the most grown and consumed food crops that turned into a cash crop in Uganda. However, where it is grown in the wetlands remains a concern for environmental experts and the country. Henry Okrut, UBC.